It was a rainy evening when the black maid named Layla was scrubbing the marble floors of the massive billionaire mansion, her hands aching from hours of relentless work and her mind racing with worry. Earlier that day, she had received devastating news. Little Amara, the billionaire's only daughter, was gravely ill and the doctors had given her only a few weeks to live. Layla's heart ached because she had grown deeply attached to Amara over the years. She had watched her take her first steps, say her first words, and laugh in the sunlit hallways of the mansion. Now, the thought of losing her filled Layla with unbearable dread. The billionaire, Mr. Harrison, was a man of immense power and influence. He was rarely seen in the mansion except during business meetings and lavish gala events. Yet, despite his distance, he trusted Layla completely. She had been with the family for over a decade, and she knew every secret corridor and hidden corner of the house. But on this day, the mansion that had always seemed so grand and protective suddenly felt cold and distant. As the rain tapped against the large windows, Layla clutched her apron and made a decision that would change everything. Amara's treatment was extraordinarily expensive, far beyond anything Mr. Harrison would authorize on such short notice. He was consumed with a high-stakes business deal that could make or break his fortune, and time was slipping away like sand through her fingers. Layla had never stolen a single thing in her life, but desperation pushed her beyond fear and morality. She had to act. She had to save Amara, the girl she loved like her own child. The mansion was silent except for the steady ticking of the grandfather clock and the sound of rain. Moving like a shadow, Layla crept past the security cameras and guards who were oblivious to the fierce determination in her heart. She knew every weak point in the house, the floorboards that creaked less, the security system that offered a 10-second window during its daily update, the hidden compartments in Mr. Harrison's study. Years of quiet observation while serving tea or polishing silver had now become her lifeline. Her heart pounded in her chest as she slipped into the study. The massive safe stood before her, cold and unyielding. But Layla had memorized Mr. Harrison's combination long ago, overhearing him mutter numbers while practicing for a speech. Those numbers now represented the only path between life and death. She paused, closing her eyes, whispering a silent apology to Amara, to Mr. Harrison, and to herself for what she was about to do. With trembling hands, she entered the code, turned the dial, and finally heard the sharp click of the last lock. The safe swung open, and the sight of stacks upon stacks of $100 bills made her breath catch. Working quickly, she stuffed as much money as she could into her apron and bag, her hands trembling but swift. The adrenaline coursing through her veins made her feel both terrified and strangely weightless. Carefully, she retraced her steps out of the study, every movement deliberate, knowing that discovery now would be catastrophic. Out in the storm, she ran through the rain-soaked streets to the private hospital where the specialist was waiting. The sterile white glow of the hospital lights contrasted sharply with the storm raging outside. When she handed over the money and signed the necessary documents, the doctor looked at her with shock and awe. Such a sum had never been delivered so urgently to save a child's life. The procedure began immediately. Layla sat in the waiting room, soaked and shivering, her lips moving in a constant prayer. She whispered Amara's name over and over, begging the universe for a miracle. She had risked everything, and now all she could do was wait. And as she waited, her mind wrestled with questions she could not silence. How could someone with so much power be so blind to the fragility of their own child's life? Why had no one else acted? She wasn't seeking reward or recognition. She acted out of love, love that burned stronger than fear. That love kept her spirit alive as she sat in the cold, sterile waiting room. Hours passed, and the storm eased into a soft drizzle. Layla leaned her head against the plastic chair, her body exhausted, her soul weary. One thought tormented her. How would Mr. Harrison react when he found out she had stolen from him to save his daughter? Would he see only betrayal, or would he recognize the desperate, unselfish love that had driven her to do the impossible? Right then, she whispered to herself and to the world. Viewers, I want to ask you, where are you watching from? because I want to know who else has ever done something they thought was impossible out of love. And if you're enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for the rest of this incredible journey, because what happens next will truly shock everyone, and you won't want to miss a single moment of it. Ursa, the storm outside had quieted, but the storm within Layla's chest only grew heavier. She sat hunched in the corner of the hospital waiting room, her apron soaked from the rain, her hands trembling as she twisted the hem of her skirt again and again. Hours had passed since the doctors rushed Amara into surgery. The clock on the wall ticked louder with every second, mocking her helplessness. Finally, the door opened and the surgeon walked out, pulling off his gloves. Layla leapt to her feet. "Doctor, please!" "How is she?" Her voice cracked, the desperation she had held in for so long spilling into the open. The surgeon gave her a long look, almost hesitant, before his face softened. "She's stable. The procedure was successful, though the road ahead will be difficult. If not for the immediate payment, I don't know if we could have started in time." Relief broke through Layla like sunlight after weeks of storm. Her knees buckled and she almost fell, catching the back of the chair for support. Tears blurred her vision. Amara was safe for now. That was all that mattered, but relief was a fleeting friend. Even as she cried, the reality of what she had done returned to her like a cold whisper. Mr. Harrison would soon notice the missing money. He was not a man known for compassion, especially when betrayed. Layla's chest tightened. Still, she told herself firmly, I would do it all again. For Amara, 1,000 times if I had to. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Mr. Harrison had returned from his meeting, tired and irritable. He strode into his study, loosening his tie, already thinking about the investors he needed to call. He reached for the safe almost absent-mindedly. He needed documents that were locked inside. The moment the heavy door swung open, his eyes froze. Empty. Stacks of cash gone. Only a few scattered envelopes remained. For a long moment, Harrison simply stood there as though his mind refused to process what his eyes were seeing. Then slowly anger flooded him like fire through his veins. His jaw tightened, and he slammed the safe shut with such force the sound echoed through the entire wing of the mansion. He picked up the phone. Security! Get me the footage from the last 12 hours, now. Within minutes, his head of security entered with a laptop. They scanned through hours of footage, watching guards patrol the grounds, maids dusting shelves, gardeners sweeping the front steps. Nothing seemed unusual until they reached a particular clip. The grainy black-and-white footage showed Layla, the maid he had trusted for over a decade, the woman who had practically raised his daughter in his absence, creeping through the hall, slipping into his study, disappearing with a heavy bag. Harrison's fist clenched around the arm of his chair. Betrayal, cold and sharp. Find her, he ordered through gritted teeth. I don't care how. Bring her to me. Back at the hospital, Layla sat by Amara's bedside now. The girl lay pale but peaceful, machines beeping steadily around her. Layla brushed a strand of hair from Amara's forehead, whispering, You're going to be okay, my little star. You just rest now. I'll always protect you. But her moment of quiet was short-lived. Heavy footsteps thundered down the hall, and Layla looked up to see two men in dark suits. Security, Mr. Harrison's men. Layla Johnson? One of them asked firmly. Her heart plummeted. She knew this moment would come, but not so soon, not before Amara could even open her eyes again. Yes, she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. You need to come with us now. She glanced at Amara one last time, her fingers gently squeezing the child's hand. Then she stood. Please, don't leave her alone, she whispered to the nurse. And with that, she walked between the two men, her wrists trembling though no handcuffs had been placed on them. The ride back to the mansion felt like a march toward her own execution. She sat silently in the back seat, staring at her reflection in the tinted window. Raindrops streaked across the glass like tears. Her mind repeated the same question over and over. Would he even listen to her? Would he understand? When the car pulled up to the grand mansion, the doors swung open, and she was led straight into the study. Mr. Harrison was waiting, standing by the fireplace, his silhouette lit by the dancing flames. His face was unreadable, calm, but in that dangerous way that made her tremble even more. Layla, he said finally, his voice low and steady. "Tell me why." Her throat tightened. She wanted to cry, to fall to her knees, to beg for mercy, but instead she met his gaze. "I did it for her. For Amara." The words hung in the air, simple but heavy. Harrison's eyes narrowed. "For Amara? By stealing from me?" His tone sharpened. "You of all people? After everything I gave you? After all the trust I placed in you?" Layla's tears finally broke free. "I couldn't wait for you, sir. She was dying. The doctors said she had only days, maybe hours. I begged them, but they said without the money they couldn't start, so I took it. I couldn't let her die while there was something I could do." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Harrison's face remained hard, but something flickered in his eyes, something he quickly masked. "You think this justifies theft? Betrayal?" His voice was ice. "Do you know what you've risked? My reputation, my business, your business?" Layla cried suddenly, the dam of restraint breaking. "She's your daughter. Not a business deal, not an asset. A little girl who loves you and needed you. You weren't there. You wouldn't have come in time. I had to be the one." Her voice shook, but her words cut through the room like a blade. For the first time in years, Mr. Harrison found himself speechless. The study was silent except for the crackle of the fireplace. Layla stood trembling, her face wet with tears, her chest heaving from the outburst she could no longer hold back. Across from her, Mr. Harrison remained still, his eyes fixed on her as though he was seeing her for the first time, not just as a maid, but as something far more complicated. Her words lingered in the air, heavy and undeniable. "She's your daughter, not a business deal." For years, Harrison had buried himself in work, telling himself that building empires was his way of protecting his daughter's future. But now, confronted with Layla's raw desperation, he felt a discomfort he had spent a lifetime avoiding. He paced slowly across the room, his hands behind his back. "Do you realize what you've done to me?" His tone was controlled, but his voice carried an edge of something unfamiliar, something like doubt. "Every cent in that safe was tied to a negotiation I've been preparing for months. Investors were waiting on my word. Your theft jeopardized everything." Layla's eyes burned. "And what would your money mean if she had died, sir? Would the deal comfort you when her bed was empty? Would the signatures on your contracts replace her laughter in this house?" Her words struck him harder than she knew. He had not thought of it that way. In fact, he had never allowed himself to think of it at all. Harrison turned sharply, his voice rising. "You don't speak to me like that. You are a maid, an employee, not a mother to her, not family." The words cut Layla deeply, but she did not falter. She took a step forward, her voice breaking yet steady. "I may not be her mother, sir, but when she scraped her knee and you were on a business trip, who stayed up all night with her? When she cried because she missed you at her school recital, who held her hand and told her she was loved? When she begged for you to read her a bedtime story, who sat by her side with tears in their eyes because she wanted you instead of me? Do not tell me I am not family. I have been there when you were not." Harrison's chest tightened. He turned away, unable to look her in the eyes. Her words were knives, each one hitting the truth he had carefully walled away. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire popped in the silence. Finally, Harrison drew a deep breath. His voice was quieter now. "Is she really safe?" "The doctors. They said the procedure worked." Layla's lips trembled as she nodded. "Yes, she's stable. If we had waited even a day longer, she might not have survived." Harrison closed his eyes briefly, exhaling as though releasing a weight he hadn't realized he carried. For the first time, his anger seemed to falter, but just as quickly the steel returned to his tone. "You should have come to me. You should have asked." "I would have. You wouldn't have." Layla cried, her voice sharp with pain. "You were in meetings for weeks. I tried to call to beg the secretary to let me speak with you, but no one cared. Time was slipping away. She was fading and you weren't there. Don't you dare tell me you would have acted. You didn't." The truth stung and he knew it. Harrison felt his jaw tighten, as if to hold back emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel in decades. At that moment, the study doors creaked open. A soft voice, weak but filled with innocence, drifted in. "Papa?" Both Harrison and Layla turned. Amara stood in the doorway, pale and fragile in her hospital gown, her tiny frame leaning against the doorframe for balance. She had been discharged early for recovery at home, and the nurse had allowed her to walk when she insisted she wanted to see her father. Harrison froze. The sight of his daughter standing there made the world stop. He hadn't seen her since before the surgery. When she had been so weak, he feared to look at her. Now, even pale and frail, she was alive, and staring at him with wide, tired eyes. "Amara," he whispered, his voice breaking. He rushed to her side, kneeling to her level. "Sweetheart, you should be in bed." She smiled faintly, her lips trembling. I wanted to see you. And Layla." Her small hand reached out, resting on both of theirs, as though to bridge the chasm between them. "Layla saved me, Papa. She stayed with me. She was so brave." Harrison swallowed hard, his throat burning. He looked up at Layla. For the first time, the walls of pride and anger seemed to crumble just slightly. "Go rest, darling," he whispered to his daughter. "We'll talk soon." Amara nodded, her eyelids heavy. The nurse appeared to guide her back to her room. When the doors closed again, the study was silent, but it was a different silence now. Not one of anger, but of something heavier. Reflection. Harrison spoke quietly, almost to himself. "She could have died." "Yes," Layla replied softly, her tears falling freely again. "And I wasn't going to let that happen." He looked at her long and hard, searching her face as though he might find deception there, but all he found was truth, raw and unwavering. For the first time in years, Mr. Harrison's voice faltered with vulnerability. I don't know how to be the father she deserves. I thought giving her everything money could buy was enough. But tonight, watching her nearly slip away, I realized I might lose her without even knowing her." Layla's heart softened. She stepped closer, her voice trembling but kind. "It's not too late. She doesn't want your money, sir. She wants you. She always has." Harrison lowered himself into the leather chair, his head in his hands. The billionaire who once seemed untouchable now looked like a broken man, trapped between guilt, pride, and the faint hope of redemption. Finally, he raised his head. His voice was low but firm. "Layla, I can't ignore what you did. You stole from me, but you also saved her life, and that I cannot forget." The firelight flickered across his face, revealing the conflict etched into every line. And for the first time since this ordeal began, Layla dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was about to change. The fire burned low in the study, casting long shadows across the room. Mr. Harrison sat motionless in his leather chair, his hands clasped tightly together, as if wrestling with himself. Layla stood nearby, her back straight though her knees trembled. She had faced his anger already, but this silence, the pause before his decision, felt even more terrifying. Finally, he broke it. "You put me in an impossible position." "Layla," he said quietly, though his voice carried the weight of judgment. "You betrayed my trust. If I let this go, what kind of man would that make me? My board, my partners, my reputation, none of them would ever forgive weakness." Layla swallowed hard. Her voice came out as little more than a whisper. "And if you punish me, what kind of father will that make you? Amara will grow up knowing the woman who held her hand through her darkest hours was cast out. Or worse, do you think she'll ever forgive you for that?" The words struck deep, and Harrison shifted uncomfortably. He hated how easily this maid, this woman, was forcing him to see things he had long ignored. He stood and walked toward the tall window, staring out into the rain-soaked night. "You should be in prison," he said coldly, almost as though reminding himself. "The law is clear. Theft is theft. I built my empire by never tolerating betrayal. And yet—" He trailed off, his hand resting against the glass. "And yet what?" Layla asked softly, her eyes searching his face. Harrison turned, his gaze sharp. "And yet my daughter is alive because of you. Alive because you had the courage I didn't. That truth is something I can't silence no matter how much I want to." Layla's tears welled again. "I never wanted to hurt you, sir. I only wanted to save her. I swear I will accept whatever punishment you decide, but know this, I regret nothing." Her defiance, her strength, it startled him. For years people had cowered before his authority. Board members, employees, rivals, none dared speak to him this way. But this woman, this maid, stood firm even when her life hung in his hands. The door creaked open again. This time it was not Amara but Mrs. Collins, the family's long-serving housekeeper. She looked from Harrison to Layla, sensing the tension in the air. "Sir," she said carefully, "if I may speak." We all know what Layla did, but we also know why. None of us could have done what she did. Not the doctors, not the lawyers, not even you, sir. It had to be her. If you punish her, you'll break more than her. You'll break your daughter too. Harrison's jaw tightened. He waved her away, but the weight of her words pressed harder on his conscience. Mrs. Collins bowed and retreated, leaving the room heavy with unspoken truths. He turned back to Layla. "You forced me to question everything I thought I knew. My power, my wealth, none of it saved her. But you did. Do you understand what that means, Layla?" She nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "It means she needs you. Not your money, not your empire, just you." Harrison's eyes darkened as if a war raged inside him. He approached her, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor. He stopped inches away, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Here is my decision," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "You will not be punished. I will not hand you over to the police, but you will not remain as you were either. You are no longer just the maid in this house. From this day forward, you are to stay by Amara's side as her guardian, her caretaker in name as well as in truth. You will be given authority, respect, and protection. But understand this, betray me again and I will destroy you without hesitation." Layla gasped. For a moment she thought she hadn't heard him correctly. Guardian, respect, protection? Her knees weakened, but she held herself upright. "Sir, I don't understand," she whispered. Harrison's voice softened just slightly. "You risked everything for her when I did nothing. I can't erase the betrayal, but I can honor the love behind it. Amara needs you, and whether I like it or not, so do I." The words struck her like thunder. For the first time in her life, she saw a crack in the billionaire's armor, not weakness but humanity. Her tears fell freely as she nodded. "I will never betray her trust or yours. You have my word." Harrison studied her for a long moment, then finally turned back toward the fire. "Go, rest. You'll need your strength. Tomorrow we begin again." Layla left the study, her legs trembling as she climbed the stairs. She passed Amara's room, where the little girl slept peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling in the soft glow of the nightlight. Layla lingered at the doorway, whispering a silent prayer of gratitude. Downstairs, Harrison poured himself a drink, though he didn't touch it. He stood by the fire, staring into the flames. For the first time in years, he wondered if his empire of glass towers and billion-dollar deals meant anything at all compared to the fragile heartbeat of the girl who called him Papa. And for the first time, he wondered if perhaps he had been wrong all along. But as the fire burned low, a new thought settled into his mind, dangerous and sobering. If word of what Layla had done ever reached his enemies, they would use it against him. Betrayal was one thing he could never afford to be seen tolerating. And so, while one part of him softened, another hardened even more. He had spared her tonight, but the world would not. And if Layla was to stay in his house by his daughter's side, she would need to be stronger than she ever imagined. The mansion seemed quieter the next morning, as though the storm had left behind an uneasy calm. Layla woke early, her body aching from exhaustion, but her heart pulled to Amara's bedside. She found the girl still asleep, her tiny hands curled against her cheeks, the machines around her humming steadily. Relief washed over Layla once more. Downstairs, however, the calm did not last. Mr. Harrison sat at the long oak dining table, his phone pressed to his ear, his expression carved in stone. His voice was low but tense. "I don't care about excuses," he snapped. "The investors want answers, and they will have them by the end of the day. Delay is not an option." He ended the call sharply, setting the phone down with a heavy thud. When Layla entered, carrying a tray of tea out of habit, Harrison looked up. For a moment neither spoke. The silence between them was different now, not as hostile but not yet comfortable. "You shouldn't be serving me anymore," he said finally. "I meant what I told you last night. Your role here has changed." Layla lowered her eyes. "It's difficult to undo 10 years of habit." "Sir?" "Then start practicing," he replied curtly, though his tone lacked the venom of the day before. Before either could say more, Mrs. Collins hurried in with a folded newspaper in her hand, her face pale. "Sir, you need to see this." Harrison took the paper, scanning the front page. His jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed. The headline screamed back at him, "Billionaire's fortune missing in mysterious theft." A chill filled the room. Layla froze, her hands gripping the tray so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Where did this come from?" Harrison demanded. "Somehow the press caught wind of the missing funds," Mrs. Collins said anxiously. "They don't know the details, but they know something. And if they dig further, they'll find me," Layla whispered under her breath. Harrison turned sharply toward her, his face unreadable. "Yes, they will." The weight of his words crushed her chest. All she had done, all the risks, all the sacrifices, could be reduced to a headline branding her a thief. And if it spread, Amara would grow up hearing whispers of scandal, taunts in every corner of society. Harrison crushed the paper in his fist. "This is exactly what I feared. My rivals will seize this, twist it, use it against me. They don't care about truth, only about weakness. And weakness is blood in the water." He paced the room, every step heavy. Then he stopped, his gaze landing on Layla. "I made a decision last night, but the world doesn't know that decision. And the world is merciless." Layla's throat tightened. "Are you saying you'll hand me over?" Her words hung in the air like a death sentence. Harrison's eyes darkened. "If I do, the narrative is simple. A maid stole from me and justice was served. My empire survives. My reputation remains untarnished." Layla's chest constricted. She lowered her head, whispering, "If that's what you must do, then do it. I never expected mercy. I only wanted Amara to live. If prison is the price, I'll pay it." Her calm acceptance unsettled him more than anger ever could. He expected her to plead, to beg for her freedom. Instead, she looked resigned, almost peaceful. He slammed his fist against the table. "Damn it, woman! Do you think this is only about you? Do you think I care what happens to you?" His voice faltered, then dropped lower. "This is about her, Amara. If you are dragged through the courts, through the newspapers, what happens to her? She'll be branded the daughter of a thief. She'll lose her childhood, her innocence. Do you want that?" Layla's eyes widened. She hadn't thought of it that way. "No, never. She deserves better than that." "Exactly," Harrison said, his voice steady again. "So I must decide. Protect my empire or protect my daughter. And protecting one may mean destroying the other." The weight of his dilemma filled the room, choking the air. At that moment, Amara's soft voice drifted in from the doorway. "Papa, why are you angry again?" Both adults turned. The little girl stood there, leaning weakly against the doorframe, her eyes wide with worry. Harrison's face softened instantly. He rushed to her, kneeling beside her. "Sweetheart, you should be resting." "But I heard you shouting," she whispered. Her gaze shifted to Layla. "Are you mad at Layla?" "Please don't be mad. She saved me." Her innocence pierced through him like a blade. Harrison closed his eyes, his hand resting on his daughter's thin shoulder. "No, darling," he said finally, his voice quiet. "I'm not mad at Layla, not anymore." Amara smiled faintly, then swayed. Harrison scooped her up gently, carrying her back toward her room. As he walked, his mind roared with thoughts. If he betrayed Layla now, he would not only lose her, but his daughter's trust as well. That night, long after the mansion had gone quiet, Harrison sat alone in his study. The newspaper lay on the desk, the damning headline glaring up at him. His enemies would come for him. The press would dig deeper. But one thought drowned out the noise, Amara's words. "She saved me." For once, he realized, protecting his empire might not be worth the cost. When morning came, the world seemed softer. Sunlight filtered through the high windows of the estate, casting golden streams across the marble floor, where Marie stood waiting nervously. She hadn't slept a wink, not after the way the night ended. With Thomas cradling Lily and looking at her with an expression she still couldn't decipher. Was it pity, anger, or something far deeper? She was too afraid to guess. Thomas descended the stairs slowly, his suit jacket folded over one arm. He looked tired, but there was something different in his eyes, less hardness, more vulnerability. Marie straightened her back, ready for whatever judgment would come. "Mr. Harrington," she whispered, "if you want me gone, I'll pack my things right away." But Thomas didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked past her toward the dining room, gesturing for her to follow. On the long oak table lay 2 envelopes. One was sealed with the family crest, heavy and commanding. The other was smaller, plain, and addressed to Marie in careful handwriting. He pushed both toward her. "The first," he said firmly, "is the hospital bill paid in full. Lily has been transferred to the best care unit in the country. She'll be taken care of from now on. The second is for you." Marie blinked back tears as she opened the second envelope. Inside was a check, more than she had ever seen in her life. Her knees buckled and she pressed her hand to her mouth, unable to breathe. "Sir, I can't accept this. Not after what I did." Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying her with that sharp, calculating gaze that had once terrified her. "So you made a mistake, Marie, but it wasn't greed, it was desperation. You didn't steal from me to hurt me. You stole because you thought it was the only way to save her." His voice softened, almost breaking. "Do you know how rare that kind of love is? You risked everything, and, in a strange way, you reminded me what being human really means." The tears Marie had been holding back spilled over. She dropped to her knees, clutching his hand. "I'll work for you until my last breath. I'll pay every cent back. Thomas shook his head. "No. What you'll do is stay by Lily's side. She needs you. She trusts you, and so—" "Do I?" The weight of his words struck her like a tidal wave. This was more than forgiveness, it was trust, redemption, a second chance not many would ever receive. Over the following weeks, the mansion changed. The halls once filled with silence now echoed with laughter. Marie no longer walked with her eyes cast down. She carried herself with quiet dignity. Aunt Lily, though fragile, bloomed under her care. Thomas often found himself watching them from a distance. The maid who had once been an intruder now seemed like family. One evening, as they sat together on the terrace, Thomas broke the silence. "You know, Marie, when I first met you, I thought you were just another worker passing through my life. But I was wrong. You saved my daughter when money and power couldn't. That makes you irreplaceable." Marie looked at him, her voice trembling. "And you gave me back my soul when I thought I'd lost it." The story of the maid who stole from her billionaire employer spread quietly among the staff, whispered in corners. But those who truly knew the truth never called her a thief again. They called her something else: guardian, savior, family. Thomas never pressed charges, never even mentioned the money again. Instead, he gave her a permanent place in their lives, a position far higher than servant. She became Lily's godmother, her protector, her second parent. And as the seasons changed, so did Thomas. His cold exterior melted, his business no longer the only thing that defined him. He began funding hospitals, creating foundations for children in need, all inspired by the woman who had once broken his trust, but healed his heart. For Marie, it was the life she never dreamed of. Not of riches, but of belonging, forgiveness, and love. The little girl she had saved became her own reason to live, and the billionaire she had once feared became her unexpected family. Sometimes the greatest miracles are born from the gravest mistakes. And sometimes forgiveness can turn a stolen dollar into a bond worth more than all the wealth in the world.